Okay, good afternoon and welcome to our series of virtual lunch and learns with Jain Irrigation. I'm Richard Restuccia, Vice President of Water Management Solutions with Jain, and this is actually our 15th virtual lunch and learn over the past couple months. And I just want to remind everybody that we do have all the past lunch and learns, and this includes information on Jain Logic to Jain Unity to smart controllers to basic design of a drip system to basic irrigation components. There's a lot on there now, and you're all welcome to go to the Jain website and you can watch all these videos for free. So I just want to remind people of that. So today I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about Jain Logic Pulse. As far as an investment in your irrigation system, if you're a grower, I'm challenged to find something that is a better value to you and what this can mean to you and the success of your growing season. Now, I want to introduce Jeff Toole next. And the reason I want to introduce Jeff, and I'm excited to introduce Jeff, is because he had a lot to do with the development of this project. Now, this was back when he was at Agri Valley, and we started talking to Jeff and his team at Agri Valley. And we said, hey, Jeff, what do growers really want? What technology could we provide to them that would make a difference? Let's really design something that comes from the grower's perspective. And instead of creating something that we push to them, let's ask them what they want and develop it and give them exactly what they're asking for. And Jain Logic Pulse was that product, and Jeff was a big part of that. So I'm excited Jeff's here to join us today to talk about Jain Logic Pulse. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Jeff.
Oh, thanks, Richard. Sounds like a lot of excitement. I know you're excited. I'm excited. I'm excited about a few things. I want to welcome everybody today and thank everybody for attending. One of the things I feel pretty excited about, and it's kind of a sign of the times, is just getting back to some form of normal. And part of that, mostly I'm looking forward to getting probably the longest I've been without a haircut in a long time. And I'm sure everybody listening today has got something, one or two things that they're really looking forward to as we, move back into some semblance of normalcy. I'm secondly excited about the topic today. Richard, thanks for the introduction. And yeah, it was a real pleasure and honor to, work with Jain on the dealer side of the business and helping define what Jain Logic Pulse is today. Frankly, I think Pulse is one of our best kept secrets. Seriously, it's a super powerful tool at an entry level price, and we haven't done the best job in getting the word out about it. Connor's going to give everyone a treat today with a great presentation on what Pulse is and really how it can help growers. And before we get into that, I'd like to take just a few minutes maybe to give a little bit of the backstory of why we developed it in the first place. A lot of people don't know that Pulse was originally named EKG. And we started there because a lot of growers were telling us that their pumps and filter stations were really the heart of their irrigation system, and they were looking for a simple, cost-effective way to monitor it. As we spoke, more and more with growers, we learned, they were really after peace of mind. And that was peace of mind at the heart of their irrigation system, was being monitored 24/7 without having to do anything on their side. So, when you think of on the medical side of things, an EKG and the monitoring of the heart, pulse rate and how the heart is performing, if you will, the health of the person being monitored, we really originally came up with this whole EKG concept of looking at the irrigation system with the pump and filter station being that heart of the irrigation system. So after a while on the development side, we figured the name EKG was kind of already taken, but conceptually what we were doing from the design standpoint and where we were going with the product was still along the lines of EKG. So we decided to use Pulse, and literally the name Pulse was launched, and that's what we're looking at. That's a little bit of the background. And, you know, as far as an entry-level product, we don't normally throw out numbers, but I think this is the time to throw out numbers just because of the nature of this product. You know, for a lot of people don't realize, for roughly $2,500 completely installed and only a $350 a year subscriptions, it's really one of the most powerful solutions out there for the investment. You know, Connor's going to give you the how and the why that statement is absolutely true. Before we do that, I wanted to announce, as part of the webinar today, we're going to make a special offer. Jane's been doing this. I think it's great. It's really helped out our customers. And it's a great way to say thank you for participating, you know, in the webinars. So I'm going to kind of put the icing on the cake that Connor's about to bake here. So anyone that purchases Pulse in the next 30 days will get their first year subscription fees waived. So that's $350 in savings. So for about a $2,500 investment, you'll get all of the benefits that Connor is about to tell you about. So with that, I thank everyone again for being here, and enjoy the webinar and fire away with your questions at the end. I really hope to see Connor sweat a little bit here. So with that, Connor, take it away.
It doesn't take much, so. Jeff, thank you so much. You do a really good job with metaphors. When I'm talking with Jeff and he's giving me advice day to day, I always love hearing his metaphors. They're always very applicable. So I'm going to actually stay on that same thread with the whole medical metaphors as we go into the presentation here. So where we are going to start off is as Jeff mentioned, we are going to start off with how this all comes together. And then at the end, we're then going to wrap it up with why. Why is this important? Why does it matter? There we go. So as Jeff mentioned as well, the name Pulse is very applicable because the filter station and the pump is very much like the heart of the irrigation system. And so having something there that enables us to be able to know what's going on without having to constantly check in on it really does help us to sleep at night a little bit better. So we do like to call the Jain Pulse our silent partner, because the Pulse unit, the device that's actually deployed at the filter station, is constantly monitoring the filter station. So it's looking for not only the data coming in as the filter station is operating just day in and day out, and then also when it's off. At the same time, it also has the ability to have alerts built in. So that way you can receive those alerts when there's a problem state that arises. So the thing that is nice about this is if you're on your phone in the morning, checking your mail, checking through text messages, and going through your email, these reports will populate your email. So you don't have to necessarily do a whole bunch to your normal day-to-day routine, but you can actually just hop on your email and you can check through all your filter stations, your filter station health, while you're starting off the day. So just to give a graphical representation, so that kind of talks about, you know, what Pulse is and what it's bringing to the table. And this is how we do it. So this is a graphical representation of what Pulse is. If anybody sat in on our recent webinars on the monitoring and control, you'll notice that this little icon right here that shows the black box kind of on the right-hand side looks very similar. And that is the point, because we're actually using the same technology and the same devices that we would for normal Jain logic monitoring and control implementations. But we're kind of taking that and repurposing the technology to have a little lower functionality as compared to the full-blown Jain logic. So this is very focused on what it's trying to do. And we're able to get some really good information with a very easy and clean install. So we're looking at things like the pre and post pressure sensors. So we're able to look at that differential. And then we're also connected to the flow meter. So with just these 3 points, we actually get a lot of information coming in about grower systems. So I don't want to just have a bunch of fancy images and cartoons, but I actually did want to show some real world examples. These are pictures of active Jain Pulse installs here in the valley. So you can see that it's a very clean, very simple install. There's not a whole lot that goes on. And the nice part is, because the filter stations, typically these sand media tanks, already have some sort of structure to them, we actually just tie in right there. And it makes it very simple and very easy for us to deploy these systems. And it's also not a huge burden on the end user as well to say, well, now I got to go pour a pad, so on and so forth. We're utilizing what's already existing. And as you notice, there is the solar panel. So these are solar powered. We can connect them to 120 volt with the solar power backup. So if power is a concern and reliability of the systems out in the field, we have that covered. So now that we've talked about what the hardware looks like, we're going to start talking about what the actual data coming in looks like. So with the Jain Pulse, like I said, you're going to get email reports. And so there's 3 reports that are going to be available. There's going to be what we call the daily email reports, the weekly email reports, and then the season reports. And we'll go through each of these in sequence here. So on the right-hand side of the screen here, we have an example of what the daily screenshot looks like. The thing that I'm really big on, and I think really adds a good value, is the ease of looking at these reports. I like that there are icons that trigger those pathways in your brain. So you can see the clock, and that obviously triggers your brain. Okay, there's got to be something to deal with time. Well, that's where your run time is. And then you can also look at pressure differentials. All this information can be gathered at a glance. So being able to start the day by looking at not only what the current state is of all the filter stations, but there's also an event log as well that shows you what's happened since the last time that the report was sent out to you. And as you can see here, all these bullet points tell you the different types of data that you would get in each one of these reports. So as mentioned, I'm going to go into the weekly report. It looks very similar to the daily report that comes into the email. But on top of that, it also gives you some analytics, kind of like a running stats, like some sports stats that come in, showing you, how things are progressing over time. And if there's, any sort of uptick or downtick that might be abnormal to the functionality for this time of year, it's able to be visualized there in the histogram.
Connor, one thing I was going to mention is that I was talking to one grower, and he said the reason he really likes the daily reports, that sometimes he tells somebody to, irrigate from this hour to this hour, or turn it on at this time, turn it off at this other time. And after he said it, I said, oh, that probably makes sense. But I was surprised, right? Because he says they don't always turn it on when I tell them, or turn it off when I told them to. And sometimes they forget or they're late, and then he gets a shorter water window. Do you hear about this a lot? Do you see this?
Yeah. So, I was actually going to be bringing this up later in the PowerPoint. So we'll circle back to it later, but I'm glad that you are bringing it up right now. But yeah, this is a concern that, as people start to adopt more and more technologies on the farm, we still have to have people out on the farm, and people do sometimes make mistakes. And so being able to try to catch those mistakes and capitalize on the response time is where the money savings are really going to be coming in. So yes, I do hear that happening, and I do hear that as an impetus for people to want to start working with some level of technology on the farm.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
You know,
of course.
Connor, if I could just add a super quick story that
Sure.
it's very relatable in this. We had a grower, one of the first Pulse customers, and he was actually over on the coast. And it's exactly what Richard said. He had given, you know, some specific, he had set the irrigation schedule. And not that this has ever happened before, but he you know, called his guy. He's looking at his Pulse report, and he calls his irrigator and says, you know, hey, did you run, you know, the full 12 hours? And of course the answer was yes. And then he proceeded to correct him because he had his Pulse report right in front of him and realized he'd only run about 8.5 hours. And they couldn't figure out, his workers were trying to figure out how he knew how long things were, how long the pump was running. So it's really a good tool, even when when you can't be there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, you know, as we're talking about, it's a very easy, very quick setup to really start getting all this information coming in. It's a single device per filter station, being able to monitor those key points that we had talked about. And you get some really good insight with just 3 points of monitoring. So a lot of value from a very minimal install. So getting back to it here, one of the things that I talked about was the event log. So opening up the report in your email, you do see the very first portion. I'll come back here. So this is the top portion of the report here that you would first be hit with when accessing the data. And then this gives you a very 30,000 foot view of what's going on, maybe 15,000 foot for being honest. And then scrolling down in the page, you then get to the event log. So being able to really start to dive into the weeds and seeing, okay, I asked, just like Jeff said, hey, I asked my guys to run a 12, 18-hour set. I want to make sure that happened because there's a lot of people here in the valley that do have to purchase water and order water, and making sure that those timings and then that water applied happen correctly is very important because we don't want money lost at the end of the day. So this gives you basically a running history of what's gone on at that filter site. So just kind of reviewing all the data that's come in. I know that it's important to water districts and for a lot of people when they're doing their calculations and ordering water and doing their planning, that the data is in acre feet. And so I just want to state that here, that the data is presented in acre feet and in acre inches. So when you're looking at, okay, here's how much I've had, here's where I need to go for the rest of the season to produce my crop, this is in a language that makes sense. As it was briefly mentioned before, I also want to come back and state this here, that not only is it giving you the daily snapshot, it's talking about what's going on week to week. It also gives you a season water applied to date. So if we're saying, you know, almonds take, you know, 3 to 4 acre feet of water, we know that we need to get to that by the end of the year. This gives a good idea of, okay, I've applied X number of water from this filter site, helps with cost calculations, things like that. And then also alerts are very important. So if you, the end user, are having these reports come into your email, you can actually have the alerts set up to where somebody that isn't receiving the emails gets the alert, so that way they can go fix the problem. So this is a great, this is a great example for where somebody like the ranch manager or the farm owner is looking through the reports and correlating that with the irrigation foreman, but the actual irrigators out in the field are the ones that are receiving the alerts when there's some sort of an alert condition, something like a high pressure or low pressure, where it's something that's out of the normal. And these alerts can be received as an SMS text. The system can auto-generate the text. You can actually customize what that message says. They can get a robocall or they can get an email. So whatever is most conducive to how you run the business, that's how the alert can be sent out, or all three can be sent out at once. So you can really bombard people with it.
Connor, that's a huge benefit, right? I always joke these days and say I need an app for my apps, right? Because we've got so much information coming at us every day. How hard is that to set up? I mean, is that a big time requirement to get it set up?
Nope, nope. All it is going in saying, I want to add Joe Schmo to my alert system. I open up the alert, I click the plus sign, and well, actually, we would do that for you. We would say, tell us his phone number. Would you like it to receive all three options or just one of the options? And then it's off to the races. So it's really just a text, call, or email to us, and we can set it up for you very quickly.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty simple. Thank you.
Yep, of course. So I just wanted to offer some more examples of what the reports look like here. One of the things that I glanced over at the beginning and that I want to come back to right now is if you look at the top of these example reports, it says system health, no issues, and it's in green. Along with logos, I'm also really big on color coding because I think that our brains can operate so fast that having color coding and simple icons that relate to things that are meaningful to us help us to really go through information very quickly. So at the very top of the page, it lets you know exactly how the system's doing and it's color coded. So as we go on to the next slide, now we see the opposite here. So system health, one issue, see the log below, it's in red, and it lets you know exactly how many issues occurred. So very quickly you can see, okay, there's something that's out of the normal. I need to take a little bit deeper dive into this. And so I had zoomed in on the example here where it says high pressure detected. And again, logos, color coding, it's something different than what all the other irrigation event logos look like. It's a hazard triangle with a red background and exclamation point. So again, being able to quickly deduce what's going on, what fires that need to be put out right now. So then that way we can continue to operate on the farm and go about our days quickly and assess the problems with very quick response time. So we've talked about the how. I want to circle back now and I want to talk about the why. Why is this important? Why does it matter? So the email reports can be sent to anybody. So let's say I'm on the farm and I set up a pulse and I not want to receive the reports, but I want my irrigation foreman and my irrigation planners to also receive the reports because we're talking weekly, if not daily, about what the irrigation events are going to look like and where we need to make up and where we can hold back. So I can actually set it up where all of us are receiving the email reports. But then, as I mentioned, the guys out in the field are the ones that are receiving the alerts. I can receive the alerts myself if I want to, so I can have that insight, but I can have my guys out in the field being bothered with, here's what's wrong, here's what needs to be looked into and taken care of. So having that information highway coming in. So with the 3 points that are being monitored, we can actually look at some of the data coming in. So if we're looking at something like low pressure and high flow, it's most likely indicative that there's some sort of a leak or some sort of a valve that's open that it shouldn't be. On the other side too, sometimes there's a valve that's closed that shouldn't be. So we'll actually, we can set up alerts for high pressure and low flow, and that alert will go out to the people necessary. And then one of the things that I think needs to be talked about a little bit more is backflushing, because there's been a number of studies and there's lots of data out there that talks about how much money can be saved by capitalizing on making sure that backflushing is done at the correct frequency and at the correct timing. So with the data coming in, we can get things like high pre and post pressure differentials. And we can look at that and say, oh, okay, I think that my system needs to be backflushed. You know what? That's actually a week before that I was planning it, or 2 days before. Or you, on the opposite side, you can say, I had it scheduled where I was going to go and backflush my system this week, but I'm looking at my data right here and it looks like I don't need to. I just saved X number of dollars in not only the pumping cost for the energy, the wear and tear on my system, but then the actual water that's needed to run the system and the labor to go out there. So there's a lot of costs that go into the backflushing process. And then Richard, as you brought up, being able to make sure that the irrigation events are being executed as planned. So, and then lastly, I know that having hard copies of things is still something that is being used by a lot of regulatory agencies. And it's also nice to be able to print out copies and then take them to the guys in the field or hand it off to a PCA or a consultant of some sort. So then that way, that coordination and that level of information flow can be streamlined. So all of these benefits, all this value, being able to coordinate with not only people at the head level, people at the field level, and then the consultant level. All these different groups can now work together with just 3 spots being monitored at the filter site.
Hey, Connor, is it okay if I add a little nuance that,
Sure.
you know, from an application standpoint, you know, we talk about alerts and those are usually triggered events, you know, and it's a specific, you're either over or under a set threshold, and it's a, you know, you just have that occurrence and the alert is sent out. One of the things that we've noticed is, and I think as people use Pulse more and more, if you watch and because you get to see what your, say, for example, your pressure differential is, you know, on your filter stations, and you get to see your flow rates and input output pressure, et cetera, the 3 points you talked about. If you see changes, you can see subtle changes over time. And so something as simple as you may have some biologicals that are building up in your drip system, and you need to perform some type of treatment. And these things don't always trigger alert until maybe you cross a higher threshold where maybe flow has gone down and pressure's gone up. Because if you set it too low, you'll get alerts all the time. But it's really helpful for growers to be able to monitor what's happening with their system over periods of time, so you can see where your filter station may be degrading. It may be time to change out your sand. It could be that you need to shock your system as far as your drip lines, et cetera. So I just wanted to add in that in addition to the alerts, just being able to see how your system is performing when you irrigate and looking at that day after day, week after week, you'll see these subtle changes, and it'll beg the question, what's happening out there? So you can oftentimes catch it before it becomes a problem.
Yeah, that's true. I think that not only looking at what's going on day to day, but looking at trends is good to be able to catch some of those subtle nuances. We all try to make sure that our filter systems are up to snuff, because if they're up to snuff, then everything else runs efficiently, and we can actually not have to put so much into the field and actually save a little bit of money there, instead of trying to fight a system that's lagging a little bit and having to put more into it to work around some of those inefficiencies. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a good point. So since this device that we deploy at the filter station is the exact same device that we would deploy for a full-blown Jain Logic system, where that gives you further data analytics, gives you some level of recommendations, and opens up the possibility to do things like pump control, it's a very simple step to then upgrade to the next step. So Jain Pulse is a great introductory into the technology space, because it gets some hardware out there, gets you familiar with not only what does the system look like in person, but it also gives you an idea of, okay, how do I start interacting with this on a day-to-day scale? How can I start bringing this in? How can I start bringing my other guys in? So that way we're all aware of what's going on at a deeper level. And then at that point, it's very simple for us to then basically flip an electronic switch and then open up the access to the full-blown Jain Logic. And then at that point, that gives you, the end user, much more access to other features. Things, as I mentioned, pump and valve control. We can then throw some soil moisture probes out there, and then giving you access to weather data and the recommendations that come with that. Things like forecasting, ETC, so on and so forth. So again, I like visuals, so I threw in a visual representation here. The title says, start with Pulse. We can see that the device is deployed at the filter station as with the earlier examples. But then what this example shows is that the customer then took that next step and just simply added on the other devices that were needed at the location, or plugged in the other things like the pump into the C3. And then that gave them access to the rest of the functionality and the value that we bring to the table. And that's what I had to bring to the table today.
Yeah, thank you, Connor. That's very interesting and a great perspective. We've got a couple questions, and the first question I wanted to ask was about the Sigma reporting. So if I'm not measuring this, or I'm not using a flow sensor, and my local water agency comes to me and says, hey, you used X amount of acre feet over the last 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is.
Yes.
Do I have any way to prove that I didn't use that much if they're saying, if they're overestimating?
Yeah, this is actually a great question. I was just hit with this week. And in some cases, and in some water districts where we're dealing with different water authorities versus districts, some water authorities encourage the use of flow meters and this type of technology out there. They just want to come and see what it is, so that way they're aware of what's being used on the farm, and they basically give it their blessing and you're off to the races. In other instances, it is nice to be able to have this data and this peace of mind, because we know that the government's not out there on the farm like we are every single day, and having something that is basically, again, peace of mind, but on a different level, saying data is king in this day and age, and being able to have my own records of what I've been running, knowing that this data is calibrated and that it's true, I can then contest when I see that there's a discrepancy.
Great. And so then if I want to, right, if I'm having to report my water use to the agency as required, will this do that for me somehow?
Yes. So as we were talking in the past slides, that it does track your water consumption. So you have all that data available. So you can print that out. You can download it into a PDF and start building your database that way. So having that available, I think, is really important. And with this whole Sigma, because there's some aspects of it that are unknown, I think those that are going to be getting on the bandwagon sooner, they're going to be the ones that these regulatory agencies come and look to say, okay, what are you doing? Okay, this is great. This is really helpful. You're getting all the types of data that we're looking for. I'm going to now go ask that your neighbor goes and does this too. Hypothetical, but I do see it as a strong possibility.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Now we've got another question about pre-filter and post-filter pressure. What should you be looking for to detect that there's a problem?
So with with irrigation system health and maintenance, we know that there's a certain differential that we want to see to let us know that our systems are clean, that they're well maintained, and that they're operating at peak performance. So having that information in the back of our minds at when this starts lets us know that we can start to watch for some of those trends and some of that data coming in. So if there's supposed to be an 8 pound per square inch difference between the pre and the post at optimal level, if we know that we start to see that rise or drop in any sense, that we know that it's something that we should look into.
Yeah. Okay, great. And then thank you. And then we had another question here, and it's about the technology. Can we use this anywhere around the world?
Yes and no. Typical response.
Right. Depend. Right?
It does depend. And and Jeff, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but it really does depend on communications. Usually it boils down to what communications and what certifications we have compared to what the local government agencies have regulations for. So.
No, it's a good answer. That was one of the thinking might get you to get a bead of sweat on your brow there. But yeah, I mean, today, we deploy Pulse in Australia and the US. Anywhere where the cellular technology that's built into the C3 is compatible, there's no reason we couldn't deploy it. But it is, you're right, it's about the communication, cellular communications compatibility.
Okay, well, listen, that's the end of the questions we have now. Jeff, I want to thank you for coming on and making a generous offer. Maybe you want to go over that again so everybody understands now that they've seen the presentation, the value you've offered.
Sure. Basically, you know, the entry point with the Pulse system installed is around $2,500. I say around just because every site's a little different, and sometimes it depends on what type of flow meter that the grower has in place. And, you know, the assumption is it's a digital, has some form of digital pulse output that we can connect directly to. It could be a little higher if there needs to be a converter put on it. And the offer was for everyone here today and those that listen in on the video once Richard downloads it to the website. For the next 30 days, we'd love to give you a free year of subscription on Pulse, which is normally $350. So it'd be a $350 savings as a thank you to get people on board.
That's really great, Jeff. I've always said, you know, for less than $1 a day to monitor what's happening with my pump station and my water, that was already a great value, but you just you know, put that offer on steroids and made a really good value. So thank you for that. Connor, I have one other question for you that came in. If you're getting, can you get these units in metric also, or is it just in US?
You know what, that one does stump me. I'm not 100% sure. Now it's standard imperial, but Jeff, do you know about the metric?
Yeah. In Australia, it's on the metric system. So yeah, the answer is yes.
Yeah, so we can use it over there too. So, okay, great. Well, Connor, again, great job today. Really appreciate your preparation and a super presentation today. You as well, Jeff. Thank you again for another great virtual lunch and learn. And of course, thanks to all of you out there that are watching. We really appreciate that. On Friday, we're going to be back at lunchtime, and we're going to learn from Corey Broad about the proper use of air vents in a drip irrigation system. So look forward to that on Friday. Again, thanks very much, everybody, and have a good, safe day out there, and we will talk to you all soon.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.